She tossed the last duffel bag into the back of the Lexus and didn't even glance back. Mom says I can have the guest room by the pool. There's more space. That's what she said. After 20 years. 20 years of 2 a.m. stomach flu, algebra meltdowns, recital dresses I hem myself, and school lunches I woke up at 5 a.m. to pack. 20 years of quietly folding her laundry while she told me about boys who broke her heart and friends who ghosted her. 20 years of stretching one paycheck into 3 so she could have name-brand sneakers and orthodontics I never got to afford for myself. And it ended with, they have a pool. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say she loved me. She didn't even close the trunk. Her mother did, sunglasses on, phone already pressed to her ear as if the whole scene bored her. I stood on the porch barefoot, holding the keys to the car she used for 4 years and the watch she gave me for Father's Day last year. She forgot both, or didn't care. I watched the taillights vanish through the slats of the porch railing. I didn't wave. I didn't move. The breeze lifted the edge of the welcome mat she used to lie on when she was 6, waiting for me to come home from work. Now it just flapped like a dumb flag for no one. The porch got very quiet. That kind of quiet that doesn't just happen. It arrives after something has been taken. And I need to say this, because I know a lot of you guys are watching this and nodding. Over 90% of you never hit subscribe, but this kind of story, it matters. It helps people like me say things out loud we were never allowed to before. So if you're listening, really listening, just hit that button. It tells the team to keep going, to keep digging into these stories we were always told to just man up and forget. Back to her. I didn't text her that night. I didn't call. I stared at the empty couch across from me and thought about the night I found her there in middle school, crying over a group chat that turned on her like wolves. I sat beside her and we watched some dumb baking show until she fell asleep against my shoulder. She said I was her best friend. She said she'd never trust anyone more than me. That was 12 years ago. Now, she was sipping iced tea by a chlorine pool with a woman who used to disappear for weeks to find herself. A woman who called me the help when I showed up to her birthday dinner with a cheap bottle of Riesling. A woman who once left our daughter waiting at the school gates for 3 hours because she'd gotten distracted at a spin class. That's who she ran to. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a total rewrite. A quiet deletion. Like someone redrew her childhood in pencil and erased me with the side of their hand. 3 days later, I got a box in the mail. No note, just the keys to the apartment I paid a year ahead on for her college. And inside, neatly folded, was a hoodie I'd worn thin from all those early morning drop-offs. I'd given it to her when she said the dorms were cold. It smelled like bleach now, like it had been stripped clean. That was the moment I stopped hoping for a phase. That was the moment I stopped telling myself she'd come around. It hit me then, not like a punch, but like frost. A slow, creeping cold that settled in my chest and made everything stiff and quiet. She didn't leave me. She replaced me. And worst of all, she looked relieved. It started with a tagged photo. She was standing in front of a mirror in a boutique I couldn't afford when I was paying for everything. Strapless dress, champagne glass in hand, her mother grinning beside her like a cat that finally swallowed the canary. The caption read, "Fitting day with mom. #bride vibes." I stared at it on my phone until the screen dimmed. I wasn't mentioned. Not even a "wish dad could be here," or one of those fake platitudes people post just to soften the blow. Nothing. Just a parade of Instagram stories over the next few weeks. Floral arrangements, cake tastings, venue walkthroughs. All of them carefully curated. All of them excluding me with surgical precision. Her mother was always in the frame. I wasn't even in the shadows. I waited for a text, a call, an offhand, "Hey, wanted to talk to you about the wedding." But it never came. So I called her. I didn't yell. I didn't guilt trip. I asked one question, "Am I invited?" There was a long pause. I could hear wind chimes in the background and traffic, like she was walking somewhere fancy and didn't want to stop. Then she said it, flat, clinical, like a voicemail from a stranger. "It's probably better if you don't come. It's complicated." Complicated. As if I were an old utility bill she didn't know how to cancel. I hung up before she could explain. I didn't want the explanation. I already knew the language. I'd spoken it for years with her mother. "You're being too emotional. You're overreacting. Let's not make a scene." The next day, an envelope arrived. Heavy cardstock. Gold lettering. Elegant. For a moment, I thought it was the wedding invite after all, a last-minute change of heart. Maybe she'd reconsidered. Maybe she remembered the time I spent 10 hours building a papier-mâché volcano for her science fair because she was too anxious to speak in front of the class. Maybe she'd seen that old photo of us camping in the backyard when she was 8. The one where she's wrapped in my jacket and holding a flashlight like a sword. I opened it slowly. My hands were shaking. I felt, God help me, hope. It was an invitation to my ex-wife's new husband's birthday party. That was the moment something inside me flipped like a breaker. Not rage, not even sadness, just off. Like someone turned the volume down on the world, and I realized I'd been shouting into silence for years. They'd sent it on purpose. The RSVP was pre-stamped. There was a line for dietary restrictions and everything. That's the kind of cruelty you don't scream about. It's too polished, too well lit. I didn't RSVP. I didn't even throw it away. I just left it on the kitchen table like a crime scene photo. Every time I passed it, I was reminded of what I already knew. I'd been uninvited not just from a wedding, but from a life. She wasn't marrying into another family. She was being adopted by one that had spent 2 decades trying to erase me. And she was letting them, smiling while it happened. There's a moment every father dreads, whether he admits it or not. The moment his daughter decides what kind of man she wants to honor. And this event, this absence, was her answer. She didn't want the man who raised her. She wanted the man who bought her brunch twice a year and made her feel glamorous. She wanted clean hands and pretty lies. And that left me, alone at the table, staring at a piece of paper that weighed more than anything I'd carried in 20 years. The chapel was something out of a magazine. White brick, ivy crawling up the bell tower, and flowers lining the path like it was royalty getting married. I didn't go in. I wasn't invited. But I parked across the street in the shade, engine off, windows cracked. I watched as guests trickled in, all heels and linen suits, each of them greeted with hugs and laughter by the same woman who once said I was emotionally unavailable because I worked too much to keep the lights on. I saw my ex-wife first. She wore a dress that cost more than I made in a month when I was working 3 jobs. She looked smug, triumphant, like she'd just finished a chess match no one else knew was being played. Then my daughter stepped out of the limo. She looked radiant, and I hate myself for still thinking that. I hate that my first instinct was pride, that even as she walked past me without knowing I was there, I thought, she grew up beautiful. She held her bouquet in the same left hand I used to bandage every time she fell off her scooter. The same hand I held during night terrors. The same hand that once slipped a crayon drawing into my briefcase that said, "Best dad ever." Now it was covered in expensive acrylics and clutching a man who wasn't me, who never was. I stayed in the car, didn't move, not because I couldn't, but because moving meant I'd admit what was happening was real, that I'd been replaced, and not just forgotten, deleted. The ceremony started. I couldn't hear the vows, but I heard the music swell. I heard people laughing and cheering. I heard the world celebrating a story that had no pages left for me. Then later, because this is how people are now, I saw it on social media. A shaky video from someone's phone. My daughter at the altar. The officiant smiling. And the words that will stick with me long after my body gives out. And now, for the first time, Mrs. her mother's last name. Not mine. Not even a mention of it. No hyphen. No middle name carryover. Just a clean cut. Like a tree branch pruned without hesitation. Her smile when she said it, it wasn't just joy. It was relief. Like she'd finally been unshackled from some invisible weight. I stared at that video until my screen dimmed. Played it again. And again. Trying to find a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. A flinch. Anything. But there was nothing. Just a woman proud to be not mine. That night, I opened the fireproof box in the back of my closet. Inside were baby photos, her birth certificate, and a lock of hair from her first haircut. I looked at the name on the certificate, my name. My handwriting. My promise to her that no matter what happened with her mother, I would always be hers. And now she wasn't mine. By choice. Legally, socially, symbolically, she had made a decision. It's not just a name. It's a declaration. It's rewriting every bedtime story, every scraped knee, every birthday candle I lit alone because her mother couldn't be bothered. It's taking all those memories and filing them under irrelevant. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I felt something shift, like a door closing inside me. Not slamming, just clicking shut. A soft, final sound that said, "You're not her father anymore. You're just a man who remembers too much." I folded the certificate back into the box, put it away, and I slept, for the first time in a long time, without setting my alarm. She always believed I was the sentimental one, the soft target, the man who packed school lunches with sticky notes that said, "You've got this, kiddo." The one who let her keep the dog after she said he was the only one who understood her. And yeah, I was that man. I was soft, but I wasn't stupid. Not then, and definitely not now. The day she was born, I started to trust. I didn't have much, just a modest payout from a work accident, and some savings scraped together from overtime shifts and skipping vacations. I didn't do it for praise. I did it because I knew someday she'd need something I wouldn't be around to give. College, a house, freedom, stability. I didn't want her to be owned by anyone. Not a man, not her mother, not the system. And back when her mother still pretended to co-parent, she pushed hard for one condition. If the trust was ever to be accessed for marriage-related expenses or early inheritance disbursement, it would require dual consent. Hers and mine. Just in case you go crazy or petty after the divorce, she said, laughing into her wine glass like it was all a joke. I signed it without flinching. I never thought I'd use it. I just wanted peace. But peace comes at a cost. And I've paid it in full. She'd assumed it was automatic. The money, the approval, the generational wealth I built while working graveyard shifts and repairing busted plumbing on weekends. Her mother likely told her, "Don't worry, it's yours by right." But rights and reality are different animals. And what neither of them remembered is that the trust didn't just need signatures. It needed alignment. The clause read like this: Release of funds upon marital union shall require the co-signature of both primary custodial guardians at the time of trust establishment. Failure to obtain such co-signature shall result in immediate and indefinite freeze of all disbursements under said clause. In simple terms, no dad, no dollars. And she just walked down the aisle in a $10,000 dress, with zero clue that the real key to her golden future was parked across the street in a Honda with 210,000 miles and a cracked windshield. The beauty of it all? Her mother built that trap for me. She never thought she'd be the one trying to unlock it. I spent that night reading the trust again, line by line, like it was scripture. I didn't want revenge. Not really. I just wanted clarity. I wanted to choose what I gave and to whom. And when I saw the wedding post go viral, filtered to perfection, all soft light, and perfectly staged first kisses, I opened the safe, pulled out the documents, and slipped them into a folder labeled Final. I didn't need to make a scene. I didn't need to crash the reception or post some passive-aggressive Facebook comment. All I had to do was nothing. Just not sign. In a world where everyone's screaming for attention, the most terrifying sound is silence. Especially when that silence comes from the one person you assumed would always show up, no matter how many times you erased him. Let her mother explain it. Let her new husband's family realize what just didn't hit the account. Let the planner start sending invoices that bounce. I poured a glass of scotch and watched the sun come up. And for the first time in a long time, I felt exactly what I was. Not the soft one, not the victim, just the man holding the pen. The office looked the same as it did 20 years ago, dark wood paneling, the smell of old leather and lemon oil, and a grandfather clock that ticked like it was counting down someone's final excuses. I sat across from Mr. Pritchard, who'd aged better than I expected. His voice had the same gravelly warmth I remembered from our first meeting when I was still figuring out how to install a crib and keep a bottle warm at the same time. He offered me coffee. I declined. "You look like a man who's finally ready to call the favor due," he said, sliding the folder I'd brought toward himself. The gold-embossed initials still shone on the front. ETF, Emergent Trust for Future Allocation. My handwriting, my blood, sweat, and 16 years of sacrifice folded into one document that had quietly matured while the world forgot who built it. "I always thought you got the raw end of it," he added, glancing down at the signature lines. "She made it easy to forget who was doing the raising." "She didn't make it easy," I replied. "She made it public." He didn't argue. He didn't have to. He'd seen enough men walk into this room over the years, some enraged, some broken. I wasn't either. I was focused, clear. The document was already notarized, the clause inserted neatly in Section 3B. Effective immediately, the release of conditional funds is revoked until direct familial reconciliation and a signed addendum of acknowledgement is provided by both parties. No drama, no loopholes, just precision. She couldn't sue it out of me. She couldn't sweet-talk her way past it. And her mother? She couldn't even touch it. Pritchard read it twice. He folded his hands over it and looked up at me with something close to admiration, or maybe pity. "She has no idea, does she?" I shook my head. "She will." He whistled softly. "You sure you don't want to wait a little longer? Sometimes they come around." "She already came around," I said, leaning back in the chair. Right past me. Didn't even slow down. He didn't smile, but his eyes understood. That unspoken agreement between men who've both swallowed too many apologies they never received. "I'll process this today," he said. "It'll go into effect as of 4 p.m. I nodded. "That's perfect." Just enough time for her to open gifts before the phone rings. He blinked. You think she'll call you? No, I said. I think he will. That part wasn't included in the trust, but it didn't need to be. Her new husband, polished, well-spoken, used to having doors opened for him, not locked. He'd married into what he thought was a kingdom. What he got was a sandcastle waiting for the tide. And the tide had just come in. As I stood to leave, I noticed the silver paperweight on Pritchard's desk. It was shaped like a set of scales. I'd never really looked at it before, but it struck me now how balanced it was. Not tipped, not cracked, just steady. Exactly how I felt walking out of that office. The door clicked behind me, sealing off 20 years of assumptions. She thought she was marrying into a future paved by someone else's effort. What she didn't realize was that the pavement ends exactly where I stopped walking. And as of 4 p.m., she'd feel it. In the calls, in the questions, in the sudden, echoing silence where a check should have cleared. No rage, no speeches, just the unmistakable gravity of consequences long ignored. And this time, the silence was mine. She was still in the hotel suite, hair pinned up from the night before, makeup smudged in a way that Instagram would call effortless. A half-eaten plate of fruit sat on the gold-rimmed tray beside her, champagne flute untouched. Her new husband was in the shower, humming like nothing in the world could touch them. Then her phone rang. She saw the caller ID, David H. Legal counsel, and rolled her eyes. Already, she muttered, swiping to answer while reclining against the pillows. David, it's barely 8 a.m. Can this wait? But his voice didn't have its usual oily confidence. It cracked, like he'd already had one too many calls that morning and hadn't had his coffee yet. I'm sorry to bother you so early, but you need to talk to your father. Immediately, she laughed. A full, genuine laugh, the kind I remembered from when she was 10 and still thought I hung the moon. David, you're adorable. I haven't talked to my father in over a year. What could he possibly? The trust, he interrupted, sharp now, urgent. The one your prenup stipulates as a future asset. It's been frozen. There was a beat of silence. She didn't understand yet. Then, slowly, what do you mean frozen? As in paused. No, he said. As in revoked. Locked down. Blocked from any disbursement pending. He fumbled through papers on his desk, pending what he's termed relational reconsideration, which I assume means reconciliation. Her laugh returned, but smaller, brittle. That's ridiculous. He wouldn't do that. He already did, David said quietly. Yesterday, before the ceremony. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Look, David continued, lowering his voice like he was afraid someone might be recording him. I know you didn't tell him about the wedding. I advised you to send at least a notice, remember? Legally, that would have protected. I don't need protection from him, she snapped. But she did. Oh, how she did. Her hands began to shake now, the phone slick in her grip. She stood abruptly, the silk robe clinging to her legs as she crossed the room. The sound of running water from the shower stopped. Her husband called from the bathroom. Babe? Everything good. She didn't answer. David was still talking. We need to schedule a call with your father. Today. Because the implications are significant. The prenup language is tied to expected trust distributions. If that trust is frozen, then came the word that finally cracked her. Then your husband's family lawyers may see this as a material breach. I've already received an inquiry this morning. She closed her eyes. No more wedding smile. No more curated perfection. Just the sharp, sudden realization that the man she thought was a soft, discarded relic had been sitting quietly behind the chessboard the whole time, waiting for the right move. Not to win, just to remind her who started the game. And now, she'd made her move. And so had I. She was still wearing the ring when the cracks started to show. 3 days into the honeymoon, somewhere on a beach where everything was curated for selfies and staged candids, she received the second call, the one that didn't come with stammering or apologies. This one came cold, clipped, and from a number she hadn't saved, but recognized instantly. Martin G., her new father-in-law. She answered with her practiced, sugary tone. Hi, Martin. We were just about to head down to. We're reviewing the agreement, he said. No greeting, no warmth, just words carved from ice. This changes things. Her stomach dropped. She stepped out onto the balcony, one manicured hand gripping the railing. Sorry, what exactly has changed? You know what, he said flatly. The dowry clause. Her lips parted, then closed again. The clause. The one her mother had pushed for so hard in negotiations. A little victory, she'd called it. It's symbolic, her mother said. Proof that he believes in her. If they're still married after 1 year, he gets a trust-backed incentive. It ties them together financially. And it had worked. The groom's side had accepted. With reluctance, sure, but her mother had a way of dressing manipulation in lace. But none of it mattered now. The clause, Martin continued, was predicated on active access to the trust, which, as I understand, no longer exists. Your legal team failed to disclose this pre-ceremony. That's a material omission. It's not omitted, she snapped, trying to sound composed. My father is just being difficult. You should have locked it before the ceremony, he said. You assumed it would just clear. That was an oversight. Behind her, the sliding door opened. Her new husband stepped out, shirtless, smiling, still in honeymoon mode. She turned away from him. He caught her tone and frowned. Martin, she said, voice quieter now. Let's be reasonable. We are, he interrupted. This is business. If the assets don't exist as stipulated, we have to reevaluate our obligations. I am the asset, she blurted before she could stop herself. There was a silence. And then Martin replied, not to us. He hung up. She stood there, staring at the waves. Her husband came closer, touched her shoulder. Everything okay? She lied. Just logistics. My dad's making a fuss. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since the vows, and his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. My father wouldn't call unless it was more than a fuss. She said nothing, just turned and walked back inside. The silence between them wasn't angry yet. It was heavier than that. It was considering. That night, she checked the account her mother had promised would fill after the wedding. 0. No deposit. No pending transfers. Just the words, trust status, frozen pending review. She didn't tell her husband. But he knew. He had the same logins. And Martin had already briefed him. He didn't say anything, just kissed her cheek in the dark and turned over, leaving her staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the chosen one. She didn't feel radiant or adored or untouchable. She felt outmaneuvered. Her whole life had been planned like a launch party, timed, photographed, optimized. But somewhere along the way, she forgot that the party doesn't mean anything if the funding's fake. And now, every step she took felt like it was on borrowed marble. Because deep beneath the facade, the champagne, the flowers, the silk sheets, was the one fact her mother had ignored and her husband's family now understood. The man she erased? He still had the last word. And now it echoed through every corner of her gilded future. She knocked like someone who wasn't sure if she wanted the door to open. No entourage, no makeup crew, no mother chirping at her side like a crow dressed in designer grief. Just her, standing there in a cream coat 2 sizes too big, the kind I bought her one Christmas when she was still willing to pretend my gifts mattered. I opened the door and didn't speak, just stepped aside. She walked in slowly, eyes scanning the apartment like it was foreign territory. She hadn't been here in years. I'd moved after the divorce, nothing extravagant. 2 bedrooms, threadbare couch, a few framed photos I never took down because no one was watching me pretend I was over it. She sat in the chair by the window, the one I always meant to replace but never did. I stayed standing. For a full minute, neither of us spoke. Then she asked, barely above a whisper, why? It wasn't laced with anger. No entitlement. No fake tears. Just raw, unfiltered why. I looked at her. Not as a father. Not as a man who used to read her bedtime stories. Just as someone who'd been cut out with surgical precision and left to bleed in silence. Because you erased me, I said. You made it official. Her face tightened. I didn't mean. I held up a hand. Not to silence her, but to stop the performance before it could begin. I'd heard the monologues before. From her mother. From her. From every person who thought intentions mattered more than impact. She reached into her purse, delicately, like she was reaching into a wound, and pulled out something folded and worn, the wedding program. She handed it to me, and I unfolded it. Page 3. Family acknowledgments. Parents of the bride, Stephanie Langford and Gregory Wells. Gregory, her stepfather. The man who once forgot her birthday and then offered to take her shopping the next day, like she was a missed conference call. I stared at the page, then back at her. I didn't write that part, she said, eyes locked on mine. I nodded. But you never corrected it. She flinched, like the truth had slapped her harder than anything I could have said. I was caught up in everything, she offered weakly. Mom said it was too late to change the print order, and then you smiled at the camera and called him Dad. I said it calmly. No venom, just fact. She looked down. I thought you'd understand, she said. It was just a choice, I interrupted. It was a choice. The air in the room changed. Heavier. More honest. She didn't cry. That would have been easier. Tears would have been a relief, for her. A release valve to prove to herself that she still felt. But instead, she just sat in it, in the weight of what she'd done, or hadn't done. The little things that cut the deepest, not because they're violent, but because they're quiet. I didn't offer comfort. I didn't want to be her conscience. She'd brought that program here like it was a peace offering. But peace has to be mutual. And I was past the point of begging to be acknowledged. You told the world who mattered, I said. And I listened. She swallowed. Her hands clenched in her lap. Is there anything I can do? I stared at her for a long time. You can live with it. No raised voices. No slamming doors. Just the finality of a truth that couldn't be rewritten. She stood slowly, smoothed the front of her coat. She left the program on the table, like it could be some kind of bridge. But it wasn't. It was a tombstone. Ink on paper, etched with the names of those she decided were worth remembering. The door clicked shut behind her, and I sat in the chair she didn't touch. Because some things don't need to be said, and some absences never stop echoing. It started with a blog. Not even a major outlet. Just one of those local lifestyle and society pages that digs up soft scandals to keep wine moms entertained between Pilates and Botox. But it had a headline that turned heads. Heiress's trust frozen after estrangement. A father's quiet retaliation. At first, it didn't seem like much. A few hundred views, a handful of curious clicks. But then someone on LinkedIn shared it with the caption, "There's always more to the story." Then a mid-tier finance podcast picked it up. Then Twitter. Then the vultures came, blogs with names like Legal Tea, The Inheritance Hour, Money Matrimony. They didn't need facts. They had a hook. Bride publicly disowns father. He pulls the plug. Suddenly, her face was everywhere. Photos from the wedding, now tinged with irony. Interviews she gave years ago about self-made ambition and female empowerment, recontextualized next to screenshots of court filings and trust documentation someone got their hands on. Comments exploded. Not all cruel. Some worse, sympathetic. Maybe he was the only one really looking out for her. She traded safety for status, and it bit her. Honestly, that dad is a legend. Her name began trending, not for the career she'd tried to build, but for the fallout she hadn't seen coming. And with it, the very thing she thought she'd left behind. Me. A quiet man. A single dad. A legal clause. And a very expensive silence. Her employer pulled her from the keynote roster of a women's leadership summit. No formal announcement, just a quiet removal from the promo flyer. An assistant emailed her with the usual language, due to unforeseen changes in public narrative relevance. Translation? You're now a liability. Meanwhile, I was out walking my dog. An old rescue mutt with crooked legs and too much personality for his size. The leash felt solid in my hand, more real than anything I'd touched in years. We walked past the newsstand where her face, laughing and blissful in a wedding gown, sat beneath a bold headline. From vows to voided accounts. I didn't stop, just kept walking. My phone buzzed. 10 missed calls from her mother. 3 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably PR reps or junior attorneys in damage control mode. 1 voicemail from a reporter who called me Mr. Langford, not realizing I'd long since stopped correcting the last name people used for me. Then a text, short and rattled, from my daughter. Please, just talk to me. I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Not because I wanted her to suffer. But because the conversation she wanted had already happened when she stood at that altar, smiled at the crowd, and announced herself as someone else's legacy. Now, she wanted clarity. But clarity isn't something you offer. It's something people earn after the spotlight dies and the cameras stop clicking. That night, someone sent me a screenshot from an online forum. Her old college roommate had posted anonymously, saying she used to talk about her dad like he was her hero. Something changed after she moved back in with her mom. It's like she rewrote her childhood. I closed the message. People kept trying to paint me as the villain or the victim, but I wasn't either. I was the variable she forgot to carry. The clause she skimmed past. The name she edited out of the program without checking what else I was holding. And now, she was learning what it meant to live in a world where not everyone plays by the rules of likes and lighting. Where some men don't shout or slam doors. They just walk the dog and let gravity do the rest. It arrived in a plain manila envelope. No return address. No note inside. Just the photo, 8 by 10, glossy, professionally shot. The kind you pay too much for because you're convinced it'll hang in your living room forever. She was in the center, of course. Radiant, eyes closed mid-laugh, frozen in that carefully choreographed moment of joy. Her husband's arm wrapped possessively around her waist. Her mother beaming like the emperor had finally unveiled his heir. The backdrop was the chapel's stone archway, drenched in golden hour light. Picture perfect. Edited. Curated. Intentional. And I wasn't in it. Not a corner. Not a shadow. Not even a table in the background. Just absence. At first, I thought she sent it. A silent olive branch, maybe. Or one last twist of the knife. But then I noticed the creased edge and faint smudge of thumbprint oil, like it had been handled, maybe passed around, maybe returned. No, this wasn't an offering. This was a casualty someone had scooped up and mailed out of guilt or curiosity. I stared at it for a long time, not out of pain, but out of analysis. Every smile, every posture, every hand placement told a story. They were proud. They were triumphant. They were whole. Or at least, that's what they wanted to believe. And then something happened I didn't expect. I got up, walked to the hall closet, pulled out an old frame I hadn't used since the day I packed up our shared family house. The last frame I bought for her high school graduation photo, the one with the gold tassel embedded in the corner. I took that photo out and replaced it with this one. Then I went to my toolbox. I found a small brass plate, blank, screwed it into the wood beneath the photo, took out the engraving pen I hadn't used since my wedding ring inscription, and carefully, without shaking, I carved. The day she chose. Not the day she left, or the day she broke me. Just chose. Because that's what it was. A decision. And now it had a frame. I hung it in the hallway. Not out of pride. Not out of spite. But as a monument. A reminder that some endings don't come with explosions. They come with slow, deliberate decisions. A name change. A missing chair. A silence that becomes permanent because no one has the courage to fill it. That hallway is quiet now. But when I pass by that photo, I don't wince. I don't ache. I feel clear. She chose a version of herself that didn't include me. And I chose to stop pretending that was something I could fix. The real revenge wasn't the trust. Wasn't the headlines. Wasn't the voicemail she left last night that I still haven't listened to. The real revenge was walking past that frame every day and not needing to take it down. Because that's how you know you've let go. Not when you forgive. Not when they apologize. But when you can look at the worst thing someone ever did to you and see it for what it is. Nothing more. Nothing less. Just a picture.